I'm excited to welcome you to MySQL. In this course, I'll be guiding you to mastering MySQL. Whether you are an experienced programmer or a beginner exploring the world of database, or somewhere in between, this course is designed to help you harness the power of SQL and MySQL. We will start with basics and gradually move into more advanced topics, all while keeping things simple and easy to understand. By the end of this course, you will have the skill and knowledge to confidently work with database. So let's get started. Before we start learning anything in SQL, I want you to have a good understanding what is a database and how do we use it. A phone book is a good example of a database. In the phone book, we have the table of contacts, we have the columns, name, phone number, and address, and we have rows. Imagine a database as a phone book, very big phone book with the millions and millions of contacts that you can have inside. And the SQL is the language that we use to communicate with our data and request specific information from our data. Let's imagine that we have an actual phone book that the people used to use with a couple of 100 pages. And let's imagine we have the same phone book as a digital database. And let's say you were given a task to find a specific person in that phone book. Okay, the first thing we would do in a physical phone book is start turning the pages until we find the table of contacts. Then we would probably start looking at the name column. And from there, we would look at each row until we found our person. Now let's look at our phone book database. So in databases, we have tables, we have columns, and we have rows. So same as the physical phone book. So the steps are similar. We would use SQL to give our database instructions on how to find the person that we are looking for. You should understand that everything we use in the internet have some sort of database connected to it. So there is a database somewhere with the table name users, and there is a column called usernames with your name inside of it. Every time you sign up to a website or a service, your data is being added to their database. So let's say you have an Amazon account. Your name, your phone number, your address, what items you have ordered, your card information is stored on a database somewhere in the world on a hard drive. And using SQL, Amazon can very quickly access that information and retrieve it back and display it to you on their website. And every time you order something, they use SQL to add the new information to that hard drive. Using SQL, they can insert information to that database, retrieve information from data, update the existing information that you have. Let's say you decide to change your password, they can just update the existing data using SQL. And they can also delete information. Let's say if you decided to remove your card information from their website, they should probably run delete query to completely remove your card information from their database. In the upcoming lectures, we are going to learn how to create database from scratch, how to insert new data to our database, how to read from our database, and how to update the existing data that we have, and how to delete the data that we no longer need. Believe me, SQL is really easy to learn if you understand the logic behind it. And before we finish, I just want to say thank you for learning SQL with me. In this lecture, we are going to install MySQL on Windows. In this lecture resources, you will find the link for MySQL, and I want you to find it and click on it. Okay, so once we are on this page, we're gonna scroll a little bit down. And we are going to press the download MySQL installer link. In this page, we want to press the first download button. On this page, we don't have to log in or sign up. We just want to press no thanks. And after pressing it, we should see the installer. If you don't see it, make sure you don't have any ad blockers enabled. Or just reload the page or give it just a little bit of time. Once the download is complete, we want to open the installer In this page, we don't want to change anything. We are going to leave it as developer default. We are going to press next. On this page, we are going to press execute. It might take some time to download everything. Once everything was downloaded, we want to press next and execute. And once again, after it's done, we press next and next again. On this page, we're not going to touch anything. We're just going to press next. And same for this page, press next. Okay, on this page, we have to create our password. And we press next, next one more time, next again, and let's press execute. Okay, after everything is done, we press finish. Then again, we press next and then finish. Then next again, we're almost done. Okay, in this page, we have to put the password to check the connection with the server. So put the password that you have just created and press check, and we can see connection succeed. Then again, next, execute. Then finish and next one more time. And installation complete. We're done with installing SQL. So you can press finish. So after we're done installing the SQL, it will open the MySQL workbench, and it's going to prompt that you put your password. So put the password that you have created. And now we have access to our server. In this course, we are not going to use the workbench. Instead, we are going to use the command line because it's better for beginners to start with the command line. Then in the future, you can pick it up the workbench on your own because it's very easy after you know how to work with the command line and how to type the commands yourself. So let's close the workbench. So I'm going to click on search and I'm going to type MySQL. And I can see MySQL command line. I'm going to pin it to start so every time I don't have to search. So when we open MySQL command line, it will always ask me for my password. So make sure you don't forget the password. Once you have entered the password, press enter. Okay, and we can see welcome to MySQL. Let's check that we are indeed connected to SQL. Let's do select 1+1. And we can see the result. Okay, congratulations, you are done installing MySQL. In this course, we are not going to install anything else, so this was the hardest thing that we did. In this lecture, we are going to install MySQL on Mac. So first, we are going to open MySQL website. You're going to have a link in your resources. Then we want to press on downloads. In downloads, we want to scroll down and press on community downloads. Then we want to find MySQL community server. And in this window, we can see the different installers. You have to choose the specific installer that matches your Mac device. And also on top, we have the archives. In the archives, you can find older version of MySQL. Maybe you don't want to update your OS system, so you can just download the older version. But make sure you download the correct installer, otherwise you're going to have issues with installing MySQL. Okay, after we have downloaded the installer, when we try to open, it's going to give us warning that it's have to be a trusted source. In my case, I can just press allow. In other cases, you have to go to settings, then security and privacy. And at the bottom, you're going to have the name of the software and you can allow it from here. Once we are in the installer, we want to press continue, then continue again. Then we want to agree with the terms. Then we want to press install, and it's gonna ask for your Mac password. Once the install is done, we want to press next. Then it's gonna ask you to put the password for root user. So the root user is the main user, so you want to create a strong password. Make sure that you don't forget that password. So just create the password and press finish. And then it's gonna ask for your Mac password one more time. Okay, and we're done installing MySQL. You can press close. Then we want to open the settings, and at the bottom you're going to see MySQL logo. So press on that. Then we can see active instances on the left. And if it shows green, it means everything is okay, you were successful. If it shows red, maybe you have installed a version that doesn't match with your Mac OS. Then we want to press initialize database. It's going to ask the password that we have created for the root user. So enter that password and press OK. And after that, it's going to ask for your Mac password. And then we want to press start MySQL server. And once again, your Mac password. And now we have our own server, so we can now access it and work on it. Now we want to open our terminal. Every time we want to access our server, we have to use this specific command. So I'm going to provide this command in our resources, so you can just copy and paste. After we have entered the command, it's gonna ask us for password. You want to put the root password for MySQL and press enter. Okay, congratulations, you have created and accessed your own server. In the future, the process is gonna be the same. Every time you want to access your server, you have to put that specific command and put the root password to access your server. In this course, we are going to do all the work in the terminal. But if you want, you can download the workbench for MySQL. I'm going to leave the link of where you can download it, but I don't suggest you using workbench because for beginners, it's always better to work in the terminal so you can learn how to write the code and learn on your own mistakes. Welcome back, and today's lecture is about showing databases, and we're going to use SQL in our first time. You can follow along or you can watch this video till the end and then do it yourself. It's up to you. So let's begin. Let's ask the question why we use databases. As a database administrator for a company that oversees various department data, each department has its dedicated database to house relevant information, such as employee records, sale data, and inventory details. The management of this distinct database is efficiently handled using SQL. The show databases command in SQL is used to retrieve a list of all available databases within the current database management system. It provides you with an overview of databases that you can access and work with. So basically, when we put this query to our command line, it's going to show all the databases that is in our system. As I said in installation video, I'm going to be using MySQL command line, but if you want, you can use MySQL workbench, but most of the time in this work, you're going to be using MySQL command line, so I recommend that you start using that. Let me show you how you can find the MySQL command line. Usually it's automatically going to be on your desktop, but sometimes you have to find it. So you can, on Windows, you can press on search, you can put MySQL, and it will bring MySQL command line. After opening MySQL command line, you can put the password that you saved during the installation, and once it's loaded, you can start using SQL. So we're gonna put down show databases, and we're gonna receive all the databases that we have in our system. So that's how we use show databases. Okay, so we can see all the databases that we have in our system, but how do we select which one we want to use? So for that, we have the keyword use. So we put down use and we put down the name of the database that we want to select. So basically, we put down the name of the database that we want to access. So the use statement in SQL is like telling the database system which specific database you want to interact with. It's like stepping into a room full of books when you're in the library. The use statement helps you focus on a particular database so you can explore its data and perform operations on it. Okay, so let's write use statement on our own. So in my case, I have the database of world. It might be different in your case. Just select which one you have for now. So we put down use world, semicolon, and at the bottom we can see that database changed. It means that now we can access the information in that specific database. That's gonna be it for this lecture. In the next lecture, we're gonna be creating our own database. Thank you for finishing this lecture, and I'm waiting for you in the next one. Welcome back, and today we're gonna create our first database. But before we create our database, let's ask the question why we use MySQL. So MySQL is free and open source database system. It's great for beginners because it's easy to learn, has a large supportive community, and offers graphical tool for managing data. It helps organize and store data efficiently, making it an essential tool for various applications. Okay, now we know why we use SQL. So let's take a look at the query for creating database. So over here you can see that we have our keyword create and we have database. As you remember, we had similar query for showing the databases. I always make the mistake that I forget the S at the end when I try to see all the databases that I have. So make sure you use show databases, and when you're creating a database, you use it without the S. So over here we have create database, electronic store. Okay, let's break it down our command. Creating database. This is a SQL command that indicates you want to create a new database. After that, we have electronic store. This is the name you've chosen for a new database. It's the identifier that you'll use to refer to this database in your DBMS. DBMS stands for Database Management System. When I execute the SQL statement in DBMS, we'll create a new empty database with the name electronic store. Okay, so now let's create our own electronic store. So we're going to open up our MySQL command line and we're going to try to create our own database. Over here, I have opened my SQL command line and I put in my password so we can start creating our own database. So I'm going to put down create database. And the database, I'm going to put electronic store. And at the end, we always put semicolon. And we can see that we were successful, one row affected. Okay, just to make sure that we were successful, we're going to use the show databases, semicolon. And over here, we can see that we have our electronic store. And we're going to use electronic store. Basically, we're just going to try to select our database. And we can see the database changed. And that means that now we can add to our database, make changes to our database. So now we know how to see all the databases that we have in our system. We know how to create a new database. We know how to access the new database. Welcome back. And in this lecture, we're going to learn about jumping tables. So let's ask the question, what does jump tables do? When you execute the SQL statement, the database management system will completely erase the entire database along with all its tables, data, and other objects. It's like demolishing an entire building, including all the rooms, furniture, and belonging inside. Using the drop database command requires caution as the action is irretrievable and all data within the database will be lost. Always ensure you have appropriate backups before executing such a command. Let's look at the command for deleting the database that you want. So we have drop database, database name. So in our example, we're going to use the electronic store that we just created. But if you want, you can create new databases, drop them, create them again. Just so you know, make sure that in the future you're very cautious about using drop database, because once you run this command, you cannot access your data again. So let's break it down. Drop database command. Drop database, the SQL command drop database is used when you want to permanently delete an entire database from database management system. Database name. In this part of the statement, you will replace database name with an actual name of the database you intended to delete. Think of this as a unique identifier for the database you're targeting for removal. Now let's open MySQL command line, and we're gonna use what we learned in the past few lessons. So let's put down show databases. We can see that we have our electronic store that we created in previous lecture. We're going to try to delete the electronic store. So we're going to put down drop database. And we're going to put the electronic store name. And we always want to put the semicolon at the end. So let's check if we were successful. We're going to put down show databases with semicolon, and we can see that we were successful at dropping our electronic store. And now we're going to have a small exercise. In this exercise, I want you to create 5 different databases and drop them. As you saw in our electronic store, we use underscore. Just know that you don't have to use underscore or any specific type of formatting for naming the database. It comes up to the person's preference. You can use camel casing, you can use just regular space for the name. So we have like 5 different types of them. So just create 5 different databases and drop all of them. And this is the end for this lecture. Thank you for finishing it, and see you in the next one. Welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to talk about tables. Previously, we have created a couple of databases, but without tables, they're just empty shelves. So tables are the most important part of database. Without the table, you're not going to have a structured collection of data. We use tables to give structure and organize the data that we're going to insert to our database. So today we're going to take a look how tables work. Let's start with the technical terms for tables. Tables in database are structured collection of data organized into rows and columns. So the important part over here is structured. Tables give structure to our database. Let me give you a good analogy for tables. Think of tables as the heart of a database. They're like the main containers where all the information is neatly organized. Without tables, a database wouldn't have a clear structure or a way to hold and manage its data effectively. Let's look at the example that we used before. So we're going to look at database phone book, and we have a table contacts. So each contact in our table of contacts have a name, phone number, and address. So basically we are giving a structure to our table. So every person that we're going to add to our contacts is going to have name, phone number, and address. When we create a table, it's empty. It only has the columns that we are going to add to it. So in this case, we have the column name, phone number, and address. So once this table of contacts is created, it's empty. So every time we add a new contact to it, it calls rows. So every time we add new contact, we are adding a new row to our table of contacts. So databases are made out of tables. In big companies, the database usually have around 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 tables. So in a bigger scale, it's get a little bit crazy. So let's take a look at the little bit simpler version of an actual database. So over here, we can see a bunch of folders. So each folder is a table. So we have country, city, address, customer, and each side we can see the structure of the table. So basically inside of them, we're telling what are the parameters for the columns that each table gonna have. For a better understanding, let's imagine that in this case, you are the store and you want to receive the address of your customer. So you're going to have the table of addresses and you're going to have the table of customers with the customer name and last name and all that kind of stuff. So you're going to want to add those two information together in our database by creating a query and receiving back the complete information with our customer name and customer addresses. So that's why the database have bunch of tables, but for now we're not going to worry about connecting tables together. For now we're looking at the structure of our tables. Let's recap what we have learned about tables. Let's look at our phone book one more time. So the columns are the name, phone number, address. So when we create a table for the first time, we're only going to put the parameters that we want for our table. And the rows are the data that we're going to insert to our table. In the upcoming lecture, we're going to talk about different data types that we can add to our columns. So in this case, for the name, you want to have different data type like letters, and for the phone number, you want to have numbers. So in the upcoming lecture, we're going to talk about the different data types that we have in SQL. In this lecture, we are going to talk about data types. When we define what we want in our table, we don't only define the columns names, like in our table of contacts. When we create our table, we have to provide the name of the column and the type of information we are going to allow in a specific column. And this is really important because if we leave our phone number column type empty, we can have something like this, where phone number is 123486790. And in the future, if we try to do anything with that information, we're gonna face big problems. So in order to prevent future errors, we have to specify what type of information is allowed in each column. So in the world of MySQL, we have a lot of different data types. For numeric, we have int, tiny int, small int, medium int, big int, float, double precision, decimal, bit, bool. And for string, we have varchar, char, binary, var binary, tiny text, text, medium text, long text, tiny blob, blob, medium blob, long blob, enum. So as you can see, we have a lot of different data types that we can use. But for now, you don't have to worry about it because right now we are going to learn the most common one, which is int for numeric type and varchar for string. I just wanted you to see that there is a lot of different types but the difference between them is very small. For now, we are going to use int for numbers and varchar for text. So let's talk about int. You can write int or integer, it doesn't matter, but I use int because it's shorter. Int is a whole number. So there are no decimals, and this is the max assigned value, which is 214,748,367. That's the max value you can assign to an int. And you can also have the same number but negative. But also you can have even larger maximum number if you set it up in such a way that you don't allow assigned, but don't worry about it. I just have to be more specific. And unless we're working with really big number, we don't have to worry about it. At the end of the day, it's a whole number. So something like 32 or 88 or negative 3,000 or 0 or 8,500. Those are all valid ints. For string, we have varchar, which is a variable length string. When I say variable length, that means we can specify how many characters is allowed in our column. For example, we have apple, tiger, banana. So apple has 5 characters, tiger has 5, and banana is 6. So 4 is also considered a varchar because it's in a quotation mark. And same for negative 444. But as you can see, the negative 444 length is 4 because we count the minus symbol for a character also. So varchar is the most commonly used because most of our text information does vary in length. Imagine you have printing company, and let's say that you're famous for printing cool text on t-shirts, but as the owner you know that you can only fit 25 characters on the t-shirt, and that's when we can use varchar and allow only 25 characters in our column for t-shirt text. So that's int and varchar. And before we can end this lecture, let's go over one more time. This is how your t-shirt business table will look like in query. We will have int for quantity, varchar for design name with the length of 35, and t-shirt text with 25. So int for quantity because it's the best type for representing count of something, and the varchar for t-shirt text because we know how many characters we can fit on our t-shirts, and 35 or 50 or 100 for design name because it's something that we are not limited by anything. In our next lecture, we will focus on creating our first table. I'm confident that you are ready for this step. Thank you for completing this lecture. I see you in the next one. Welcome back. We have talked a lot about tables and data types. So now we are ready to create our first table. So let's look at the syntax for creating the table. To create new table, we specify table name and we specify the column name with the corresponding data type. So this code would look like this: create table employees, open parentheses, name varchar, open parentheses 50, close parentheses, comma, salary int, close parentheses, semicolon. Let's break down this code. Create table name employees with the following columns. Column number 1, name data type varchar with the maximum length of 50 characters. This column stores the name of employees. Column number 2, salary data type int. This column stores the salary of employees as a whole number. I know that decimal number is better fit for salary, but for now we're just gonna use int. Okay, now let's create our first table. We write show database. Actually, let's make a new database. Create database my store. Then we need to switch to my store database using use my store. And now we can start creating our table. So we put down create table products, open parentheses, product ID, and it's gonna be int. Then we're gonna put product name, which is varchar, and the length we're gonna put 100. And let's put price int. Then we're gonna close the parentheses and semicolon. Let's add one more table. We're gonna put down create table, customers, open parentheses. Let's put customers, customer ID. It's gonna be int. Then we're gonna put first name, data type varchar, the length 50. Let's put last name varchar, length 50 again. Let's add email varchar 100 and phone number, let's put varchar 20. And we want to close the parentheses and semicolon. So now we have products, customers. Let's add one more, orders table. Let's type create table, orders, open parentheses, order ID. It's gonna be int. Then let's put customer ID, int, price, data type, int. Close the parentheses and semicolon. So let's check if we were successful. Let's put down show tables, semicolon. And over here we can see that we have our customers, product, and orders table. So how do we check our tables? Okay, let's start by typing show databases. And we are going to access my store. And from here we can check what tables we have. We write show tables, and we can see the tables that we have created in previous lecture. But you might ask, how can we check the columns names and data parameters? We can use this command. I think it's pretty straightforward. Show columns from, and we have to provide the table name. So in our case, we're gonna write show columns from customers. In the result, we can see field, customer ID, first name, last name, email, phone number, and we can see the data types that we have assigned to them. So for customer ID, we have int, then first name, last name, email, phone number, we have varchar with appropriate text length. Next to type, we have null, key, default, extra. Those are extra parameters that we can assign to our tables. But for now, we're not going to talk about them. In future lectures, we're going to go over them. Let's do a couple more. Let's do show columns from orders. And we can see that we received the field and the type for order table. There is actually a shorter command for receiving the same information. It's DESC, and we have to provide the table name. Or we can write describe and the table name. So let's do first DESC orders. And we can see that we received the same information as we use show columns from order, and let's use describe orders. And we can see that we received the same information. But I always use the SC because it's just shorter to write. There is one more important thing we need to know about tables is how to get rid of them. Remember we used drop database. It's the same for tables. Just remember that you have to be very careful with drop command because it's not going to ask you, are you sure that you want to delete this table? It's just going to disappear instantly. But our tables are empty, so we are good to drop them. So let's drop our customers table. So we write drop table, customers. Okay, and let's write show tables. And we can see that we have our orders tables and products table, but we don't have the customers table. This will be it for this lecture, but before we finish, I have a small challenge. If you were following me, drop remaining tables and drop my store database. Thank you for completing this lecture. See you in the next one. Welcome back. So we have created a bunch of tables. So now the main question is how do we insert data into them? The way we insert data into our tables is by using insert statement. In this example, I'm going to be using the database that we have created in our last video. So how do we use insert statement? So we start by typing insert into, then we have to select the table name. In this case, we're going to select pizza. Then we open the parentheses. We have to provide the column names. We're going to provide pizza name, toppings, and price. Then we have to provide the values. We type values. We open the parentheses. In SQL, we can use single quotes and double quotes. It doesn't matter, but the most common practice is to use single quotes. And also when we are providing the value, it has to correspond with the column name. In this case, our margarita value is going to be attached to pizza name because they're both in a first position. Whatever information is in the single quote, it's going to be attached to pizza name. Then we have to put comma. Then we open another single quote. In that single quote, we provide tomato and mozzarella. And the tomato and mozzarella is going to be attached to the toppings because it's in the second position. And after that, we close the single quote, we put comma, and we provide 12 for the price. Just remember that it doesn't have to be in this exact positions. You can put the price in the first position or the toppings. Just remember that the values have to correspond the position that you put the column's name. So now we have the basic idea how insert statement work, and I think it's a good time to do small practice. I'm going to use the database that we created in the previous video. Let's start by checking what databases we have. So we type show databases semicolon, and I can see that I have my Mamma Mia Pizzeria database. So I want to select that database. So I type use Mamma Mia Pizzeria semicolon. Before we start inserting, let's check what tables we have in our pizzeria database. So we type show tables, and we can see that we have table customers, orders, and pizza. It's always a good idea to check the tables before you write insert statement to make sure that you're inserting to the right table, to check what kind of tables you have, and to check their spelling. So we have to start with insert into, then we have to specify the table name. Then we have to type the column's name. In this case, we have pizza name, topping, price. Then we have to add the values. Values have to correspond with the names and their position. So pizza name is in position number 1. So we have to type the pizza name in values as position number 1. Then we have toppings in position number 2. And in values, you can see that we use 1 semicolon. So we can put as many toppings as we want, but it has to be inside that semicolon. So we have tomato, mozzarella, and that's going to be our toppings. And we have the price, it's 12. Okay, now you know how to insert data to our tables. I want to give you a small challenge. Your challenge is to write an insert statement that adds John Doe's detail to our customers table. That's for challenge number 1. And for challenge number 2, your challenge is to write an insert statement that adds customer with ID number 1. You can pause the video now and give it a go, and after you're done, we're gonna go over it together. Okay, I hope you were successful with our small challenge. So let's start with inserting the customers. So we type insert into customers, then we provide the column names, first name, last name, phone number. Then for the values, we have to provide John Doe. Then we provide the phone number. Okay, let's do the orders. So same thing. We type insert into orders, customer ID, order date, total amount, values. So for values, we have to write 1 for customer ID, then 2013-08-16 for order date, and 25 for total amount. Just remember that it doesn't have to be in this specific order. So let's say you can put order date at position 1, and in values you have to put the date in position 1 as well. Welcome back. Let's go over the select statement. In the beginning of this course, I briefly showed you how select statement work. In the previous lecture, we have added data to our tables. And how do we check if we inserted data is in the right table or in the right order? We use select asterisk from, and we provide the table name. The asterisk is a wildcard symbol. It means get everything. So let's check the data we inserted in previous lecture. So let's make sure we are in the right database. Let's type show databases. Then we're going to select, then we're going to use our Mamma Mia Pizzeria. And we can now select everything from our pizza table. And we can see that we have our 2 pizzas, margherita and pepperoni, the toppings, and the price of the pizzas. This is the most basic use of select statement. In the upcoming lecture, we're going to dive in deeper into select, but for now, this is good enough. Okay, now we know how to insert data, how to check our inserted data. Now let's learn how we can insert many pizzas at the same time. This is how we previously added 1 pizza to our pizza table. And this is how we are going to add many pizzas. So this statement starts the same way. We have insert into pizza, pizza name, topping, price. Then we have values. We have pepperoni, tomato, mozzarella, pepperoni, 14. And at the end, when we close the parenthesis, we put a comma. And after the comma, we open another parenthesis, which means it's a different column. So we have to provide the pizza name, which is Mushroom Lovers, the toppings, and the price. And after we close the parentheses again, we put comma, and we put the pizza name again. And we can do this as many times as we want. We can do 1,000 times, 2,000 times, 10,000 times. But at the end, we have to, when it's the last column, we have to close the parentheses and put a semicolon. Okay? Now let's do one together. So we're going to type insert into pizza, pizza name, topping, price. Then we have values. I'm just gonna copy and paste to just save some time for you. And we can see all 3 rows affected. It means that we were successful. Now let's check to make sure that we were successful. We type select everything from pizza. And as you can see, we were successful. We have our pepperoni, mushroom lover, and Hawaii. And as you can see, we have 2 pepperonis. In the future lecture, we're gonna go over how to prevent that. And this will be it for this lecture. Thank you for finishing this lecture. See you in the next one. Welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to talk about null. Remember when we typed DESC, we were given field type null for each of our column. As an example, let's look at our pizza table. So we can see that we have our field, which is basically the name of our column. Then we have the type, where we provide what type of data is allowed in that column. And we have null, and we can see that the null says yes. Well, you might ask what the yes means. It means that the null is allowed in that column. Null is a value in SQL that represents a lack of any value. Because null means no value, by having yes in a null section, we are basically telling SQL that we don't require our users to put value in that column. So right now when we are creating our pizzas, we can put the pizza name, the topping, and the price empty. So we don't have to provide any information. It can be null. It is important to note that null is not same as 0, because 0 is a number. Null is more about lack of any data. So right now we can do something like this. We can insert into our pizza, but we're only gonna provide the pizza name. We have the values as Hawaiian, and we can see at the bottom we have Hawaiian that has toppings and price, and we have the new Hawaiian that has just the name, and for topping we have null and null, which is represent lack of any values. Because we have yes on each column, we can even do something like this. As you can see, for pizza name we have null, for topping null, and for price null. It's a still valid row, but I think we don't want our database to allow entry of pizza without any information. So this is where not null comes in. So we could just update our existing pizza table, but for now we're just gonna create new pizza. We're gonna call it pizza 2. In the future we're going to learn how to update existing tables, how to change the provided restrictions. But for now we're just starting our journey in SQL, so it's just easier to create new table. So as you can see, this time when I'm creating the pizza 2 table, I'm providing the pizza name, topping, price, but the only difference is at the end of the pizza name, after the varchar, I'm gonna say not null. And we can see when we get the description of that table, we can see that the pizza name in a null section, it says no. So let's see what happens when we try to create a pizza without providing the pizza name. As you can see, we are doing the same thing that we did with the regular pizza table. We're trying to insert a pizza without any information. And you can see that it says field pizza name doesn't have a default value. This error might seem weird for you because maybe you were expecting to see pizza name doesn't exist, or you didn't provide pizza name, but we see doesn't have a default value. We're going to talk about the default value in the next lecture, but for now, because we got the error, it means that the SQL didn't allow our entry to compile. And if we check our pizza table 2, we're gonna see that it's totally empty. As you can see in this example, we have provided the pizza name and we have provided the pizza price. And we can see when we do the select, we can see that we have our buffalo pizza with the price of $12. Just make a note that you don't have to provide, in this case, you don't have to provide the price of the pizza, because if you remember, we left the price as null yes, so it means we don't have to provide the price. So in this case, we can only just provide a buffalo for the pizza name and it still will comply. This will be it for this lecture. Thank you for finishing the lecture. See you in the next one. Welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to talk about default values. Remember when we describe our pizza table, we saw that we have a default section and each column has its own default value. Right now, if you take a look, we can see that each column, like pizza name, has a default value of null. And as we know, null represents lack of any value. You might ask the question, so what if the default is null? In the previous lecture, when we tried to add data to our pizza2 table, we got error stating that the pizza name doesn't have a default value. To avoid that error in the future, we're going to learn how to add a default value to our columns. This is the syntax that we are going to use to create pizza3 with default values. As you can see, we are adding a default value to each of our columns. So for pizza, we're gonna have regular, for topping cheese, for the price 10. And after creating pizza3, when we check the describe, we can see that our default now have been changed. So if we try to add a new pizza to our pizza table without providing any information, this is what we will get. As you can see, even though we didn't provide any values, we still have our pizza added to our pizza table. And we can see that we have for pizza name regular, toppings cheese, and price 10. Let me show you one more example. As you can see, I have inserted new pizza, but I only provided the topping and the price. So for topping, we have tomato, mozzarella, and pepperoni. And the price we have raised to $14. And when we do the select pizza3, we can see that we have the previous insert when we didn't provide any information. And over here, you can see that we have the second pizza with the name regular. So even though we didn't provide the pizza name in our insert, we had it set as a default regular. You can see how default can be helpful in actual database. Imagine you have to create a database for an app similar to Instagram or Twitter, and every time users create new post, we have to capture the date and the time of the post. By using default value, we can ensure that every time user create a new post, we can capture their exact date and time. One more example, imagine that you are creating a database for a store and our store have to have table of products, and in the products we have to have the product name, the price, and the quantity. And let's say you have created a brand new product. You know the price of that product, you know the name, but you don't know how many of them you're going to have available in your store, and you just want to add it to your database so you can start creating the website page for that product. In that case, when we create our table of product, we want to make our quantity default value as a 0. So in the future, when we want to create a new product, we don't have to specify the exact quantity of the item. Okay, now we mostly understand what default value do and how it works. But you might have a question, why do we even need not null if we have default? We can just create a default value and even if we don't specify a value, it's not going to be null. But it's not a good idea to only use default value functionality, because we can do something like this. We can manually insert a null into our table. It's always preferred to use not null with default, because when we are creating a column with the default value, it means we're not expecting a null. And if we don't have not null in our column, then if we accidentally get a null value in our database, it might mess up our program. But don't get me wrong, having null allowed in your column, it's not a bad idea. You just have to know how to use the specific function in your favor. So here is a good example for allowing a null to your database. Is imagine you're creating a database for university students and you want to collect their record. And in our record table, we are going to have home address. And it's a good idea to allow null in that column because not all students have home address. And also we can allow null into emergency contact column. In each of these cases, allowing null makes our database system more flexible and user-friendly. Okay, that will be it for this lecture. See you in the next one. Welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to talk about primary key. By looking at the description of pizza table 3, we have learned how to work with the null statement and how to work with the default. And in this lecture, we're going to learn how to work with the primary key. So right now you can see that the key section is empty in our table. And if you check our previous tables, it will be empty as well. So the big question is how the key is going to help us. So right now I can insert pizzas with same pizza name, toppings, and price. I can insert as many of them as I want. And this is what we will get in our database. As you can see, all the pepperoni pizzas that we have are identical. And maybe it's fine in some cases, but imagine if you're trying to retrieve a specific pepperoni pizza, you're not going to be able to retrieve that because all of them are same. That's why when we create our tables, we try to add some sort of unique identifier. So when we try to retrieve a specific data, even though we have many of the same data, we can retrieve the specific one that we want by using that identifier. It's really a common practice to add identifiers to tables. In the world of SQL, you are almost always going to add some sort of identifier to your table. So in our case, we are going to try to get something like this. We are going to add a specific ID to each pizza that we are going to create. So in the future, if we're trying to retrieve a specific pizza from our data, we can use the specific ID of that pizza instead of just relying on the name. So there is a couple of ways that we can add our pizza ID. The first thing you might think is to just add another column called pizza ID, and every time we create a pizza, we can just add 1, 2, 3. But it's not a good idea because nothing is stopping us from just creating a pizza with the ID number 1 over and over again. That's why we are going to use primary keys. So basically, primary key is just a fancy way of saying that the pizza ID have to be unique. So you can't insert 2 pizzas with the ID of 1. So once again, we are going to create a new pizza table where we are going to tell to create a column with pizza ID, which is going to be an int, and it's going to have not null, and we're going to put that it's have to have primary key. Okay, let's do this one together. You can follow along or you can just watch. So let's create our table pizza 4. This time we're going to have pizza ID column with primary key, and the rest is going to be the same. Pizza name, topping, process, the last one. Okay, we have successfully created our table. So we are going to insert data to pizza 4. And as you can see, the only difference is that we have to provide the pizza ID. So you can see that on top we have the pizza ID column, and in values we have 1. Okay, let's try to add pizza ID 1. And we were successful. Now let's try to add pizza ID 1 more time and see what happens. And as you can see, duplicate entry 1 for key, pizza for primary. So it's restricting us from adding another pizza with the pizza ID 1. Now let's try to add the pizza with ID number 2 in. And as you can see, we were successful by adding the pizza. To make sure that we were successful, let's select everything from pizza 4. And we can see that we have pizza ID 1 and pizza ID 2. And now we can add as many pizzas as we want. And before we finish this lecture, let's check the description for pizza 4. And as you can see in the key section, we have now indicating pre. It means the primary key is activated on that column. Okay, that will be it for this lecture. See you in the next one. Welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to talk about CRUD. So CRUD is an acronym for 4 things: create, read, update, delete. And they are the 4 basic things that we want to do with our database. We want to create a database, we want to read the database, we want to update existing database, and we want to delete parts of database. So far we have learned how to create using insert, and also we have learned how to read using select. In the upcoming lectures we are going to learn how to update and delete. Imagine if one of our users decides to change their password. We have to be able to update their existing password in our database. And for delete, we are going to learn how to remove a specific data from our database. For example, imagine one of our users decides to cancel their subscription in our website. So that's the case that we might use a delete. So before we finish with this lecture, we are going to create a new table together because I want us to be on the same page. I'm going to provide you with a couple of lines of code so you don't have to type the query yourself. You can just copy and paste. So first we are going to type drop tables employees, and then we are going to recreate employees table from scratch. So in our new table, we are going to have ID, which will have auto increments enabled. Then we are going to have first name, last name, position of the employee, and then we are going to have the salary. If you want, you can just copy after me, but I suggest that you check the lecture resources and you will find this exact query, so you can just copy and paste. And after we have successfully created our new table, we want to bulk insert the list of our new employees. So let's copy and paste that. To make sure that we were successful, let's check our new table. We do that by typing select star from employees. And we can see we have our new 8 employees. So how do we read the data? So far we know that we use select to retrieve data. We already have used many times a select statement. We used select star from table name, which retrieves everything from that table. It's a good example of reading a table because we are retrieving the data that is stored in our database. Let's look at the statement that we are familiar with. So over here we have select star from employees. So the star part is we're basically saying to our database, give me all the columns that you have in this table. Sometimes we want to get all of the columns that we have, but we don't have to. We can specify what column we want to retrieve back. So for example, we can say select name from employees. So let's try retrieving just the name from our employee table. Select star from employees. And we can see that we have all of our employees. And now let's do select name from employees. And now we can see that we only get the name column from our table. And we can do the same with all of our columns. We just have to specify the exact column name that we want to retrieve from our data. Let's do one more. Select salary from employees. And we can see that we only get the salary column. Okay, let's imagine that we want to retrieve the first name and the last name of our employee and their salary in a one query. So how do we do that? We write select, then we have our first name, then we add comma to separate the column name, then we write last name, comma, salary from employees. I hope now you can understand why SQL is so important, because imagine if you have a giant company with millions of workers and you have a giant data with all of their information, their address, phone number, ID number. But imagine you need to retrieve only their first name and last name and their salary, and you don't want to get all of the information that you have stored in your data. So you can just use a select statement and get the result that you're looking for. We are going to talk about the where clause. It's a special keyword in SQL that helps us narrow down the rows that we are working on. So right now we know how to select a column and retrieve all the rows in that specific column. But you might think, if you have millions and millions of data in your database, how selecting a table is helpful. That's where the where clause come in to help us. Let's imagine that we have a website and we have a couple of thousand active users. And as a good business, we want to wish a happy birthday to our users. So one of the ways that we can achieve that, we can run a query and retrieve all the dates of birth of our users. But that's not efficient. The other way is that we can check today's date and we can check in our database a matching month and a date. And from there we can find the exact users that have birthday today and we can send them happy birthday wishes. So the where keywords basically helps us to narrow our select statement. You should know that the where keyword is not limited to select only. It can work with update and delete statements also. So let's do a couple of examples together to understand the where keyword a little bit more. So let's say we want to find employees that have salary of 50,000. We can use this statement. We can use select star from employees. Then we write where salary equals 50,000. So let's try together in our actual database. Once again, we type select star from employees where salary equals 50,000. And we can see that we only get the employees that have salary of 50,000. Okay, but let's say that we don't want that extra stuff. We only want the first name, last name, and the salary amount. To achieve that, we can do this. Select first name, comma last name, comma salary from employees where salary equals 50,000. And now you can see that we only get the first name, last name, and the salary. We can even make it better. Let's say we want employees that have salary of 50,000, but we only want to retrieve the first name and the last name. We don't want to retrieve the salary amount. So we can even do this type of statements. Select first name, comma last name from employees where salary equals 50,000. So how this statement works, when we run this query, SQL will start from looking where salary equals 50,000, and then it's going to jump to selecting the first name and the last name from that found data. So before we finish with this lecture, let's look one more time at the slides. So as we now know, we use where keyword to narrow our columns down. And it's important to note that we are not limited by checking numbers only. We can check a name, we can check addresses, we can do anything. So actually, let's do one more where we check last name. Okay, let's select first name, comma last name, comma salary from employees where the last name equals. And as you remember, we have to use quotes if we are referring to varchar. And as you can see here, we have it, our employees with the last name of Wilson. Thank you for finishing this lecture. See you in the next one. In this lecture, we are going to talk about the U in CRUD, which stands for update. How do we update existing rows in our table? We use update more than you might think. A good example is if you're changing a password on a website, it's probably using an update statement. Another example is if you're adding an item to your cart and removing item from your cart, or making an order or changing order details. Almost any change that you make in the database, it's going to require you to use update statement. So the big question, how do we update in SQL? So this is the query that we are going to use. As you can see, we have keyword update. Then we have to provide the table name, which is going to be employee. Then we have set. And after the set, we want to provide what we want to update. In this example, we're trying to update the salary of our employees. And we are familiar with where keyword. So basically, we're trying to say in what exact rows we want to update the salary. So in this case, we're trying to say update the salary in rows which are 50,000 to 55,000. I hope you can see how this is really helpful. If we didn't have the update query, the other option would have been to delete our employee and insert the exact same employee with the 55,000 salary instead. And imagine if you have like a couple of thousand employees, how hard can it be? Or if you have millions of users and they change their passwords, their username and stuff like that, how hard it would have been to do without the update query. Let's do a couple of examples together. Let's open MySQL. Let's type show databases. And I want to use the pizza database, so I type use and then the database name. Let's check if we're in the right database. Type show tables. And yes, we have our employees table. Let's do select star from employees. And let's look how many employees have 50,000 salary. So we have Michael with 50,000 salary, Alice and Olivia. So let's remember them and let's run our update query. Okay, so we are going to type the same query that we had in the slides. So let's type update employees set salary equals 55. So that's the salary that we want to set as. So we want to update to 55,000. And then we're going to type where salary equals 50,000. And let's check if we were successful. Let's run select everything from employees. And as you can see, we have Michael, 55,000 salary, Alice and Olivia. So we were successful, but that's not the only way that we can run an update query. Let's say that we want to update the salary of exact employee that we have. Let's do Dave. So David has ID number 5 and he makes 45,000. The process is the same. We are going to type update employees set salary. Let's set his salary to 80,000. Then we type where and we are going to use his first name to find him. Let's type first name equals, and I hope you remember if we are referring to text, we have to use quotation marks. So we open quotation marks, type David, and let's check if we were successful. And as you can see, David now makes 80,000. But you might think it's not practical because in a big company there can be many employees with the first name David. Okay, we can use his first name and last name, but that's not practical also because there can be many employees with first name and last name. And that's when our ID column with auto increments comes to rescue. We can use this query to update David's salary. Let's type update employees set salary. Let's give him 95,000 and where ID equals 5. Let's check if we were successful, and as you can see, ID number 5, David, now has 65,000 salary. Okay, let's learn how to delete a specific row. So it's pretty straightforward. We use keyword delete from, then we have to provide the table name, in this case employees, and usually we want to narrow it down, so we are going to use where ID equals 5. Otherwise we would get something like this, delete from employees. This query is going to delete every single row that you have in your table, but most of the time you will not use the delete in this type of query. Usually if you want to delete the entire table, we'll use a drop keyword to delete the whole table. So let's start by deleting our employee with the ID number 5. First, let's look at all of our employees. So we are going to do select everything from employees. Let's find our employee with ID number 5. So it's going to be David. Let's now try and delete David from our employees table. So as we looked, we have to type delete from employees where ID equals 5. Okay, let's look at our employees again to make sure that we were successful. And as you can see now, we don't have the David in our employee table. And as you already know, we don't have to use the ID. It's just easier that way. We can use the name or we can use the salary. Let's say we want to delete all the employees that have 60,000 salary. In that case, we are going to type delete from employees where salary equals 60,000. And this query should have deleted all the employees that had 60,000 salary. So let's check. And as you can see, we no longer have employees that make 60,000. So delete is the most easiest part because it's straightforward. You're just removing a specific row or rows from your table. So this will be it for this lecture. See you in the next one.